Hello, I'm Susan, and I'm 30 years old. I met my husband Ethan through a mutual friend, and after 2 years of dating, we got married. We haven't started a family yet, but we're thoroughly enjoying our life together. Ethan's family owns a thriving factory that employs about 50 people. The business was founded by Ethan's late father and has expanded considerably due to the dedication and effort of all involved. Currently, Ethan's sister Maria manages the company. She is unmarried and excels at her role, likely inheriting her knack for management from their mother, as both are exceptional communicators. Maria is very approachable and welcoming. She made me feel like a sister right from our first meeting, which was a refreshing change since I grew up with my brothers. However, not everything is smooth. The factory operates close to our family home, and since my father-in-law passed, my mother-in-law has retired. She looks forward to our 2 p.m. coffee breaks, which I have come to dread. Anytime I am tasked with fetching her coffee, my spirits plummet. She uses these breaks to voice her discontent, often questioning why Ethan and I haven't had children yet, a topic out of our control. Her words can be cut. If I don't respond, she grows more irritated, making hurtful remarks about my worthiness as Ethan's wife, and even making morbid comments about my deceased parents. This tension stems from a misunderstanding that occurred when I first met Ethan's family. Upon learning that both of my parents had passed away, my mother from cancer when I was 8, and my father from a heart attack when I was 18, my mother-in-law was visibly shocked. My childhood was challenging, but my father raised my brother and me single-handedly. I deeply miss him, especially since he passed before I could truly show my gratitude for his sacrifices. Navigating these family dynamics has been tough, especially when confronted with my mother-in-law's harsh words. Yet, despite these challenges, the bond I share with Ethan and the kindness from parts of his family like Maria gives me strength. I cherish the new family ties I've formed and am learning to handle the more complex relationships with grace. People often express sympathy when they learn about my past, acknowledging the challenges I must have faced growing up without my parents. However, my mother-in-law's reaction was starkly different. "So, you might not live long either, huh?" she remarked once, stunning me with her blunt and insensitive words. During that uncomfortable moment, my husband Ethan was just as shocked as I was. Yet my mother-in-law continued to press the issue as if it were a matter of practical concern. At one point, as I was grappling with doubts about my place in the family, Maria, who had remained silent up to then, suddenly made her stance clear. Slamming her hand on the table, she interrupted the tense atmosphere, her voice cutting through the silence, forcing everyone to freeze. When my mother-in-law tried to seek affirmation from her, suggesting, "Right, Maria? You agree with me, don't you?" Maria responded with a frosty glare. "What are you talking about? Ethan chose Susan himself and she's wonderful. Why can't you support that?" Her words, firm and protective, surprised her mother, who held her in high regard, and it marked the end of the overtly harsh comments, at least in the presence of others. Still, the subtle digs didn't stop entirely. During our coffee breaks, when it was just the two of us, I could see the disappointment in my mother-in-law's eyes when I, not Maria, brought her coffee. Fortunately, Ethan and I didn't live with his family. We rented a nearby room which spared me from constant exposure to her negativity, limited only to those brief interactions. Our brief reprieve from living under the same roof ended abruptly when a record-breaking hurricane wreaked havoc, leaving our room and several others in the building severely damaged. The ceiling leaked so badly that staying there became impossible. While trying to manage this crisis, Maria offered a solution with an innocent smile. "Why worry? Just stay with us. Your commute will be 25 seconds. Given the circumstances, we moved in with Ethan's family temporarily. "Welcome home, Ethan. It must have been tough, but Mom is happy we can live together again," my mother-in-law greeted us, displaying a warmth directed mostly towards her son. Ethan, however, mostly ignored her, his demeanor resembling that of a rebellious teenager. Then, noticing me, she remarked, "Oh, Susan, you're here too? I didn't notice because you're so quiet. Smile more." Her words, Meant to be lighthearted, only added tension, reflected in Ethan's frustrated expression. The dynamic in the household was strained, yet this experience only emphasized the complex layers of family interactions and the resilience needed to navigate them. After moving in with my in-laws following the hurricane damage to our apartment, I faced the new dynamics of living under the same roof with them. To show my appreciation on our first night, I decided to cook dinner, preparing a simple yet hearty meal of bread soup and steak. Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law complimented the meal, which eased some of my tension, and I felt a moment of genuine relief. However, an unexpected turn happened just as I thought dinner was winding down. My mother-in-law stood up, humming cheerfully, and retrieved a container from the fridge. She then generously topped her steak with its contents, which, to my surprise, was jam. This unusual pairing caught the attention of everyone at the table. My husband, sitting next to me, looked visibly disgusted, while Maria, with an eye roll, commented that no amount of persuasion could stop their mother from her peculiar food habits before bursting into laughter. Observing more closely, the sight of jam on a perfectly good steak was peculiar indeed. When you eat something salty, you crave something sweet, right? My mother-in-law explained, quite pleased with herself. Despite her enthusiasm, the thought alone was enough to give me heartburn. Noticing my hesitation, she encouraged me to try it, proclaiming it delicious. I managed a forced smile which did not seem to satisfy her. "I'm recommending it for a reason. You might live longer if you follow my example," she remarked cryptically before leaving the room. My husband and Maria quickly apologized for her odd behavior, explaining that she had an intense sweet tooth and never felt her day was complete without indulging in something sugary. Apparently, her health checkups always returned normal results, which seemed miraculous given her diet. Maria then shared that she was often sent to buy cake because her mother found it embarrassing to do so herself. This errand had made Maria quite familiar with all the local cake shops. Ethan, chiming in, expressed concern about their mother's health habits, feeling guilty that Maria often had to manage their mother's whims alone. "Well, I think you guys will have to help out more from now on," Maria cheerfully declared, suggesting that we might be in for more lively interactions with my mother-in-law. Living with the in-laws, despite its challenges, had its perks like the drastically shorter commute, but it also meant navigating a complex web of family dynamics, dietary quirks, and unexpected comments, all under one roof. I had taken on the responsibility of managing the household chores, making sure everything was in order both before and after my workday. Despite my efforts to engage in conversation with my mother-in-law, she frequently dismissed me or reacted coldly. Regardless of her attitude, she never passed up an opportunity to criticize the children over coffee breaks. Since relocating here, my days have increasingly become more challenging, likely due to the added stress, which visibly affected my mood. My husband noticed this shift and suggested multiple times that we should visit a doctor together. He even proposed escaping to a hotel for a short break, which I declined, considering it an unnecessary expense, especially since the nearest hotel was quite a distance away. The situation took a turn for the worse when my husband announced an upcoming week-long business trip. To my dismay, he also mentioned that my sister-in-law Maria would be joining him. This meant I would be alone with my mother-in-law, which filled me with dread. Although he offered to take me along, I decided against it, hoping to endure the week despite feeling unwell. On the morning they left, Maria sent a message to my phone titled Mother-in-Law Survival Guide, which humorously advised, "If anything happens, just give her cake and you'll be fine." It included a list of local cake shops and her favorite selections from each. This quirky guide was surprisingly comforting, given the tough week I was bracing for. I remained optimistic that after the week, our home renovations would be complete and we could return to our usual living situation. However, that glimmer of hope dimmed on the first evening alone when I came back from work to find my mother-in-law confrontationally blocking the entrance. She demanded, "You know why I'm angry, don't you?" I responded, somewhat exasperated, "No, I'm not psychic." It turned out I had missed both the scheduled 2 p.m. coffee breaks, something that slipped my mind amidst the chaos of juggling work and home in the absence of my husband and Maria. I had hoped she would be understanding, given her work history, but instead, she lashed out the moment we were alone, accusing me of starting this harassment and labeling me a wicked woman. I was stunned, feeling an immense disconnect and wondering why I was being treated so harshly when all I had done was inadvertently miss a couple of coffee breaks. I was counting down the days until my husband and sister-in-law returned, holding on to the hope that it was just a few more days of enduring the strained atmosphere. During a particularly rough day, I had bought a cake over my lunch break and left it in the office fridge, planning to smooth things over with my mother-in-law. When I mentioned the forgotten cake, her demeanor shifted from anger to delight. "Let's just forget today happened. Just don't forget tomorrow, okay?" she said with renewed cheerfulness before returning to her room. From then on, I was diligent about remembering the coffee breaks, knowing the drama that would ensue if I slipped up again. On the morning my husband and Maria were due back, I was overcome with stress, experiencing nausea, headaches, and a total loss of appetite. I couldn't handle work, so I took the day off to visit the hospital. The doctor's words shattered me. "It's quite serious. Can your family come right away?" I was diagnosed with cancer and given a prognosis of possibly only 2 to 5 months left. Tears stained my face as I returned home, physically shaking and emotionally spent. When I arrived, I collapsed onto the bed, only to be interrupted by the door slamming open. My mother-in-law stormed in, scolding me for skipping work while the others were hard at it. Her harsh words only intensified my headache. With little energy left, I told her I was feeling ill and turned away to close my eyes. She lingered, continuing to rant about my supposed inadequacies and even insinuating I wouldn't live long. I lay there silently, feigning sleep. Suddenly, she demanded to know why I hadn't prepared for today's coffee break. Her insensitivity was appalling. I opened my eyes to find her hovering over me. "Grace, I'm sorry, I'm just not well enough to go shopping today. Could you please?" She cut me off dismissively, demanding chocolate cake and accusing me of faking my illness. My frustration boiled over. "Shut up! Listen to me. I have 1 month to live. Go buy your damn cake, you idiot!" My words left her speechless, her eyes wide in shock. At that moment, my husband and Maria appeared, alarmed by the confrontation. "Mom, what are you doing? And Susan, what do you mean by 1 more month?" My husband's face was pale, mirroring Maria's concern. Ignoring the visibly shaken mother-in-law, my husband rushed to my side. His support was a sudden relief and I burst into tears. "I can't take it anymore," I sobbed. "The doctor says it might be cancer and I feel terrible, but she keeps nagging me to go buy cake. Enough is enough, and stop bothering me about the kids too. Just leave me alone, you idiot." All my pent-up resentment towards my mother-in-law came pouring out as I finally voiced my anguish and frustration. As I broke down in tears, my husband and sister-in-law fixed my mother-in-law with icy stares. The thought of sending a sick person out to buy a cake seemed absurd to them. Maria, usually so cheerful, now wore a grim expression that was frankly intimidating. In this tension, my husband raised his voice, revealing something deeply personal. "You've been making mean comments about us not having kids. Well, the reason we can't have kids is because of me," he admitted. It turned out that about a year after we got married, we saw a doctor because we were having trouble conceiving. The test showed that I was fine, but that there were issues with my husband's fertility. He had been devastated by the diagnosis and frequently apologized to me, looking so forlorn. I never wanted to burden him further, so I avoided discussing children. I loved our life together, just the two of us, and never considered leaving him over our inability to have children. We had kept this private, especially from my mother-in-law, knowing she would only use it to hassle us. As my husband spoke, My mother-in-law's face seemed to drain of life. Just then, my phone rang. It was the hospital calling, and the tone was urgent. They asked us to come in immediately. The call ramped up my anxiety, and I began to cry again. "It's okay, Susan. Can you stand? I'm right here with you," my husband said, his voice thick with emotion. Together, we hurried to the hospital. When we arrived, we were quickly ushered into a room where not only the doctor but also the hospital director were waiting. They had shocking news. There had been a dreadful mistake. My medical records had been confused with another patient who had the same name and birth date. It was a misdiagnosis. I did not have cancer. The oversight seemed unbelievable, yet the tired expressions on the faces of the medical staff spoke volumes. This error later made local news, prompting the hospital to promise a review of their procedures to prevent such a mistake again. They referred us to another hospital for a follow-up. Back at my in-laws' house, it appeared that Maria had taken the time to reprimand my mother-in-law, who now seemed smaller, almost shrinking into her chair. Maria later confessed to me that she had been terrified at the thought of her brother potentially losing his wife. The entire ordeal had brought some harsh realities to light, and it seemed to have changed the dynamics in our family, hopefully for the better. Amidst the tears and confessions, an unexpected twist of fate transformed our emotions. When my sister-in-law Maria, with genuine concern etched on her face, asked about my well-being, I revealed with tears of joy spilling from my eyes, "I'm pregnant." Beside me, my husband too began to cry, his tears reflecting the pure happiness we both felt. We rushed to the maternity hospital as recommended, where it was confirmed early on in the visit. "Yes, you're pregnant. We can hear the heartbeat," the doctor announced. Hearing this, we both cried even more, overwhelmed by the joy of the news. Maria, who was with us, also shed tears, expressing her relief and happiness. Following this emotional roller coaster, Maria got engaged to her long-term boyfriend and announced her plans to move to another state with him after resigning from her job. We had been aware of her plans, so it wasn't a shock to us. Meanwhile, my husband, who was about to take over as the new CEO, had his schedule packed with client meetings. The business trip, which he later explained was cut short, allowing him to return home early, was for this transition. However, my mother-in-law was completely out of the loop about Maria's life changes. When Maria mentioned her upcoming marriage and move, my mother-in-law was utterly surprised. "What? Getting married, quitting her job, and moving to another state?" she exclaimed in disbelief. Maria playfully reminded her, "Yeah, I told you, remember? Well, it doesn't matter now. It's all settled." This left my mother-in-law dazed, but eventually we all shared a laugh over the confusion. Upon returning home, we were greeted by the sight of our previously leaky roof, now fully repaired, and our room looking as good as new. We cheered with delight at the renovations, feeling a fresh start was truly upon us. Despite the newfound joy and repairs, the atmosphere remained somewhat strained with my mother-in-law. My husband, in particular, harbored a deep-seated anger that was hard to dispel. My husband was more upset than I was, and had even declared he never wanted to see his mother again. However, she began to show up occasionally during our coffee breaks, not with cakes as before, but with healthier alternatives like biscuits. It seemed she was trying to adopt a more health-conscious approach, especially now that she knew she would soon be a grandmother. The employees, many of whom had worked with my father-in-law when he was CEO, seemed genuinely pleased to see her. This made me realize that she wasn't inherently unkind, perhaps just a bit misguided in her previous actions. Over time, our interactions became more frequent and positive, and she gradually stopped her habitual complaining. When our daughter Catherine was born, my mother-in-law truly transformed. She began to contribute more helpfully, buying diapers and often leaving homemade side dishes for our dinner. She'd leave these in a cooler outside our door with a message, choosing not to ring the bell to avoid disturbing us. I really appreciated these thoughtful gestures, and it made me feel like we could genuinely get along. What sealed this newfound peace was a moment shortly after Catherine's birth. My mother-in-law took my hand, her eyes filled with tears, and sincerely thanked me. "Thank you, Susan, really thank you," she said. Witnessing her genuine emotion, I knew her transformation was sincere. Maria, too, seemed to be thriving in her new life, and recently shared her pregnancy news. It looks like it won't be long before we're all gathered at the in-laws' house, sharing a meal in a genuinely harmonious setting. This hopeful future felt like a significant and welcome change from the past tensions.